Welcome to the 700 Club, an American tragedy. That's what President Biden has called the pandemic, saying people are dying who don't have to die. Well, in response, the president is now issuing strict rules on vaccinations for federal employees.
The president's order has already received pushback, and frustration is growing over mixed messages from the White House about masks, with several states making it clear they won't go back to mask mandates. Here's Jennifer Wishon.
The Delta variant is being blamed for a surge in new cases and hospitalizations, leading to numbers similar to what we saw last summer. Now President Biden is using his office to pressure more Americans to get vaccinated, starting with the government.
Every federal government employee will be asked to attest to their vaccination status. Anyone who does not attest or is not vaccinated will be required to mask no matter where they work, test 1 or 2 times a week to see if they've acquired COVID.
The order impacting more than 4 million federal workers. Pushback was immediate from the Postal Workers Union, several teacher unions, and others. But more Americans are protecting themselves against the Delta variant. Last week, some 3 million people getting shots, up nearly 20% over the previous week. Still, frustration over mixed messaging from the White House is growing after the CDC issued new guidance this week suggesting even vaccinated people wear masks indoors.
I don't think mask mandates work. We had the President of the United States telling all Americans, begging them, get your vaccine, take your mask off. Now, that guidance is different. What does that tell people? Mixed messages from the government.
On Capitol Hill, it's a tale of two houses. In the Senate, masks are recommended. In the House, they're required.
We got to go around and see, okay, we can't come to the floor. I can't execute my constitutional duty unless I wear a mask. Well, which is it? Vaccines or masks? 7
states have already banned mask mandates. At the same time, vaccine requirements are appearing in the private sector. Google, Facebook, and Netflix requiring most employees to be vaccinated before returning to work. Entry into this music festival in Chicago requires proof of a vaccine or negative test. And while vaccinated Americans are still testing positive for COVID, their cases tend to be mild. Well-known Christian author and pastor Max Lucado recently caught the virus despite being vaccinated himself and wrote, "Though miserable, the misery would have been worse with no vaccination." But as cases rise, it's clear the debate over how to treat this latest surge is far from over. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Well, for more on this story, our CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson is with us. So, Lori, why has the Delta variant caused such a spike in cases?
Well, it's far more contagious than any other thing that we've seen up until this point. It's really hardly even the same virus. Health experts say it is one of the most contagious viruses now that they've ever seen. It is as contagious as Ebola and the chicken pox. Yesterday, Admiral Brett Giroir, who is a physician and was one of President Trump's health advisors, says if you haven't been vaccinated and if you haven't already had COVID-19, it's just a matter of time before you get this Delta variant. It carries 1,000 times more viral load than any of the variants we've seen so far.
Is it airborne? I mean, can you just get it from breathing air? Do you have to be close to someone else who's infected?
Yes, it is still transmitted person to person, but when a person has 1,000 times more viral load, it is extremely easy to catch if you are near someone.
I read a report just last week saying that we're only one mutation away from having a variant that's even worse that could get through all the vaccinations. What can you tell us about that?
Well, viruses mutate. That is the very nature of viruses. They always mutate. Anytime they are passed from person to person, as viruses spread, that's how they mutate. Sometimes the mutations aren't that big of a deal. Sometimes they are a very big deal. So we already know this is the Delta variant. We already know that the Lambda and the Gamma variants are out there, and we don't know what they will do. So the best way to avoid variants is, of course, to avoid the spread of disease.
Well, are vaccines still the best defense against this? Yeah, I go back in history when the virus first appeared. The CDC was saying in March, you don't need to wear masks. Now you need to wear a mask. I mean, the advice we're getting seems to be all over the board. So is vaccination the best way to do it, or should we go back into some kind of personal lockdown where you literally don't expose yourself?
Well, masks and lockdowns are like shooting a bullet at this virus, whereas vaccines are like a cannon. So, yes, vaccines are the best solution, according to almost all health experts. And, you know, when people decide whether or not they want to get the vaccine, I know for me, one of the things that I thought about was long COVID. Long COVID is extremely serious. It's affecting hundreds of thousands of Americans. So many people have long COVID that it has now been declared a disability because it actually prevents you from living your regular life. You have body aches, brain fog, enormously serious fatigue, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. But Gordon, people who have long COVID generally were people who had only mild cases of COVID. And now scientists are telling us that there's a very real possibility of long-term permanent neurological problems such as Alzheimer's associated with COVID-19. And this would not be surprising because this is what we saw with the Spanish flu, the pandemic 100 years ago. 10 years after the pandemic ended, there was a huge surge in Alzheimer's among people who had mild cases of the Spanish flu. So when people say, you know, I don't want that vaccine in me, you also have to ask yourself the question, do you want the virus in you? We know that viruses hang around inside our bodies and can later turn into terrible things. The chickenpox virus can hang around in your body for decades, and then you can get shingles. And if you've ever known anyone who's had shingles, it's excruciatingly painful.
Yeah, I'm one that's had shingles, and now I'm getting the shingles vaccine. So it's one of the problems with novel viruses. We just don't know what they're going to do. What do you think about the report that there's a link to a diminished IQ if you've had COVID-19?
Well, see, there again, we're hearing all this reporting of neurological problems from people who have had COVID-19 and still have long COVID. And then now that there are surfacing these things that may indicate long-term or permanent neurological problems, which is what you're talking about. So for me personally, when I was deciding whether or not to get vaccinated, I was never worried about dying from COVID or even being hospitalized. But I don't want that virus in me because of what you just said, the neurological problems, because my brain is really important to me. And so again, people say, I don't want that vaccine in me. That's your choice. But do you want the virus in you? That's what you have to weigh. And again, every medical decision is, you know, risk benefit. You have to weigh the risks and the benefits.
All right. Well, Lori, thanks for the insight. Let's turn now to another story. This is from the Middle East. Archaeologists in Jerusalem recently uncovered part of the ancient city wall from 3,000 years ago. It was uncovered just days before the Jewish fast marking the destruction of the first and second temples. So why is that a key part of this discovery? Well, Chris Mitchell explains from Jerusalem.
Finding this part of the wall in the City of David archaeological site provides a key to understanding the First Temple era of ancient Jerusalem.
In the 60s, famous British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon, just a few meters north of here, uncovered a 30-meter section of the same wall. Then she claimed already this is the wall of Jerusalem during the time period.
Then, according to Dr. Vuko Savovich, about a decade later, Israeli archaeologist Yigal Shilo found another section further south, but a piece of the puzzle remained missing.
For a number of years, we attempted to find additional sections of this wall, and we couldn't. So much so that we started doubting the existence of this wall.
That brings us to the discovery of two more sections, which clears up the mystery.
So now we can conclusively say that, yes, the city of David at least had one massive wall that surrounded the city of David.
The wall behind me would have protected ancient Jerusalem for about 200 years, from about the 8th century BC until about 587 BC. In 600 BC, the Babylonians besieged the city, which is described in the book of 2 Kings. The Bible says Nebuzaradan came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Archaeologists found evidence of that burning just inside the wall. This part apparently wasn't destroyed, possibly because of the steep hill below it. In addition to the wall, archaeologists found artifacts indicating what life was like in the kingdom of Judah in those days.
And we found right here where I stand a bulla of a person called Tzafan, which is abbreviation of Tzefania, which we find in the Bible as well. Just a few centimeters away, we found a Babylonian stamp seal.
The jar handles were stamped with rosettes and circles and lamelech, meaning belonging to the king.
You find a really beautiful wall in so many ways. You touch something, or you walk on something, or you lean against something that you know somebody did the same thing 2,600 years ago. So it's emotional.
For now, the excavation will continue as the archaeologists try to understand how the nearby Gihon Spring and other sites fit together. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the City of David, Jerusalem.
Well, for the past 150 years, archaeologists have been discovering all kinds of artifacts in Israel, and whether that's from the Temple Mount, from the City of David, from Magdala on the Sea of Galilee, and every single one of the discoveries proves the Bible. It's amazing how these artifacts are showing that the biblical record is an accurate record of history, history of the Jewish people, history of the kings of Israel, history of the prophets, history of the temples. If you want to know more about it, we have something for you. It's called Written in Stone, where it's a whole series of archaeological films where you can get educated on the discoveries that are happening right now in Israel. So if you'd like to get a copy of the latest segment of that, it's called Secrets of the Temple. It goes into the first and second temple, the archaeology showing the existence, all the wonderful discoveries that are coming, and it's yours for a gift of any dollar amount. So for that gift, you'll get instant 4K streaming access, and then we'll send you a DVD copy as well. If you'd like it, call us, 1-800-700-7000, or you can go to cbn.com, written in stone, or you can text secrets to 51555. Now, the reason we're asking for a gift is we're in production right now of a new documentary called The Oracles of God, showing the proofs of the Bible. How did we get the texts? How did we get the translations? All of that is being produced right now. We have a production team actively working on it in Israel, and we need your support to make it happen. So if you'd like to be a part of that, get Written in Stone, Secrets of the Temple. Call us now, 1-800-700-7000.